Have you used any fault-tolerant API which prevents your code from failing? Have you seen a code which doesn't return any exception but it does some fallback operation? In this video, we are going to see how to use Hystrix and implement the circuit breaker design pattern and how we can use Hystrix Dashboard to see what is happening or monitoring your application internally.
Press the bell icon on the YouTube app and never miss any update from Tech Primers.
Hystrix is a library created by Netflix. It was created with the purpose of solving the fault tolerance in a distributed system. How Netflix uses Hystrix is they use Hystrix as a library in order to handle failures and do some fallbacks when there is a failure. At a high level, just understand that Hystrix is some fault tolerant framework similar to how we have a catch block in a try catch exception block. So inside the catch block, we catch some exceptions or unknown errors and then we do something with that particular exception, right? Similar to that, Hystrix has a fallback mechanism with which you can do some fallbacks. Additionally, you can configure these fallbacks by using the circuit breaker design pattern. Circuit breaker design pattern is something similar to how a circuit works in your electrical board. If you're familiar with the electrical circuit board, you have different states like open, close, and half open. Let's take a typical example of switching on a electric tube light. If you have your circuit open, then the current doesn't pass through the circuit and your light is always switched off. So this is the state where the circuit is open, which basically means something has broken. If the circuit is closed, that's when your electricity will pass through the circuit and the light is going to glow. So typically in a successful scenario, the circuit is going to be closed. So always the circuit is going to be closed initially and it is going to get open when there is a failure. So when there is a failure, the circuit will be opened and we can see that from the Hystrix dashboard. So how the circuits are closed or how many circuits are closed, what are the different circuits which are closed or which are the circuits which are open, and we can even see the statistics of how many requests came in and how many requests are failing as well. So Hystrix consolidates all these circuit breaker design patterns and shows up in the Hystrix dashboard. So when does the circuits get open automatically and when does the circuit get closed automatically? You can control that using configurations where you can configure saying if let's say there are 100 requests coming in and if there are 5 requests which got failed, open the circuit, and for the next continuous 5 requests, don't allow these requests to come in. By default, fail them. If you have noticed any high performing websites, let's say for IRCTC website, you would have noticed that if you try to refresh or if you try to click the refresh button again and again, sometimes it immediately fails. This happens because there is a fault tolerant or a circuit breaker which has been implemented which will break the circuit. It will not send you till the server. It will say that my first request failed, so I'm going to fail you for the next 5 continuous requests until I know that the circuit is going to be functional. So the sixth request will be now allowed. So the sixth request might take few more seconds and it will try if the circuit is going to work or not. If it fails again, then it will again open the circuit. So this is how circuit breaker works. So let's see that with an example. Let's take a fictitious e-commerce website example, right? This is the architecture of a small e-commerce website where we have a mobile app and a browser. The requests are coming in from different sources here and there are different microservices which are hosted here. What happens when the shipping service goes down? The mobile app will crash, right? That is when we need to create a fault tolerant API where the mobile app should not crash. Instead, it just returns an empty response or it just returns an error message to the user saying something is going wrong and you should not crash the UI if some services failed. So this is a typical example of how you can implement fault tolerant systems. Let's go to our usual website start.spring.io and we can create a Spring Boot application which uses Spring Cloud Hystrix, and we are going to use Spring Cloud Hystrix Dashboard. The group I would say is com tech primers, our usual group, and I'll just say Hystrix Dashboard example. The dependencies which we would require are just Spring Web or Spring MVC framework. Then we need the Hystrix library, which is nothing but the circuit breaker implementation from Netflix. We also need the Hystrix dashboard, so that is another dependency. In order to support these Hystrix dashboard, we need to create the actuators as well. So we are going to use the actuators. Actuators are nothing but some endpoints with which you can monitor your application, monitor your Spring Boot application. We'll see that why we need actuators as well. So let me generate this project. I'll just unzip it from the terminal. I'll also open it with IntelliJ. Let me maximize it. Now if you see the pom.xml, the different dependencies which we have are the actuators, the Spring Boot web, the Spring Cloud Hystrix, and the Hystrix dashboard. That's all. We don't have anything else. We are just going to create a simple Hystrix implementation, and we are just going to use Hystrix dashboard to view that. In order to enable Hystrix, you have to add the annotation at enable Hystrix. So this will enable our application to stream Hystrix data. So this is going to stream some data to the dashboard. So this is going to be a client, and also we need to enable the dashboard because we want to see the dashboard as well, right? We want to have our application dashboard embedded into the same application. So we are going to use dashboard as well. If let's say you have multiple microservices, you can host a separate dashboard service and then host only the dashboard, and you can use a tool called Turbine which can merge all these different Hystrix streams, and then you can see it in the dashboard. In our case, we are going to use the dashboard and the Hystrix implementation in the same process. So that is why we enabled both Hystrix and Hystrix dashboard here. You can even do enable circuit breaker. That is another annotation. If you go inside the circuit breaker annotation, you will be able to either use the Hystrix implementation or whatever circuit breakers which are configured in the Spring Boot application. So in our application, we are using Hystrix. There are other implementations as well which you can use from different vendors. But yeah, we are using Hystrix from Netflix. I'll create a simple REST resource just to show how we can implement Hystrix. I'm just going to mark it as a REST resource, and just consider that the URL is going to be just REST. I'll also add a get mapping. I'll say hello string hello. Typically what we will do is we will do a hello world, isn't it? So what happens, something goes wrong here, right? How can we introduce artificial failures here? I'm just going to use a random utility. I'll just use random utils dot next boolean. This is just going to give the random integer or random boolean value where it will decide whether it is true or false, and I'm just going to throw an exception. So that way we are going to introduce artificial failures in the function. So what I'm doing here is randomly I'm just throwing an exception. This is going to introduce an artificial exception. So in case of a normal application, if we don't have a Hystrix implementation enabled, what happens is we get a failure message, right? The exception shows up in the UI, so the UI response will have 404 or whatever type of exception it is. Let's say 500 internal server exception. So your REST endpoint will return an exception back to the client. However, I don't want to do that. In order to do that, I'll enable Hystrix. In order to mark this particular method to be fault tolerant, I can add this annotation called Hystrix command, and I can give a fallback method. Fallback is nothing but a catch block or a failure scenario which will be triggered if there is any exception in this particular method. I'll just make a fallback hello, fallback hello, and we can give a command key. We are going to call it as hello, and you can give a group. So you can give a group name. I'll also say hello for that. This is just to identify uh, the particular method from the Hystrix dashboard so that you can easily, uniquely identify which is the place which is going to fail. Now we have created a fallback method. We need to implement it here. The signature of this particular method should be exactly the same as the method where we are adding the Hystrix annotation. The name of that should be this, the hello fallback. Whatever method name we have mentioned here, it should be the same here. Here I'm just going to return saying fallback hello initiated. So this way, whenever we hit the hello rest endpoint, if there is a failure, we will know that there is a fallback. If there is no failure, we will be getting a hello world as a response. So what else do we need? That's it. So I just have implemented a simple Hystrix command. I don't want anything else. I'm going to start this particular project in a different port. So I'll just say 8092. Also, I'll want to use Java 8 in my project. I'll just change that. And let's start the project. So this is a Spring Boot application which is just having one particular REST endpoint called rest/hello, and we have implemented some Hystrix implementation or Hystrix command which can do something. Let's see what it does. So it says the port failed. I think I have not given the correct. I think I gave the wrong name, server.port. I just need to rerun this. So this should start the Spring Boot application in the port 8092. Since we have enabled actuators, actuators create some health check endpoints, and also it creates an endpoint called Hystrix stream. So if you notice here, these are different actuator endpoints. Actuator creates all these endpoints, for example, health, dump, trace, refresh, all these are created by actuators, and also it has something called Hystrix stream. Hystrix stream is the REST endpoint which is going to stream the information about the health of the method which we added here. So it is just going to stream the health of the REST resource implementation, whatever we did here. So the health of the fallback hello or the hello group will be streamed via this particular endpoint, and using the Hystrix dashboard, we are going to see that. The Hystrix dashboard is present in slash Hystrix. So it will be present in slash Hystrix. So if you see here, it is going to present in slash Hystrix, and slash Hystrix.stream will have all the streaming information about this particular JVM. Let's go to the browser, localhost colon 8092 slash. Let's check if the process is up, right? Yeah, it's up. This is the Spring Boot application, so it shows that particular error. If you go to Hystrix, this is going to bring up the Hystrix dashboard. So this is the Hystrix dashboard here, where you can provide a URL of a different application as well. So you can monitor any application in this particular dashboard by just providing this URL here. We are going to use the Hystrix.stream. We are just going to use Hystrix.stream here. I'm not doing anything else. I'm just hitting the Hystrix.stream, which has the streaming information about our JVM. So right now it shows nothing. I'll just open one more tab and then I'll show you by hitting the, okay, this is just coming out. Let me minimize this guy. I think I'll have to show it separately. Let me show that. I'll minimize this as well. Okay. So in the back, if you see, there is nothing right now. Let's hit the REST endpoint which we had created, rest/hello, right? That's what we had created. This should return hello world if it is successful. And if you notice here in the background, when we hit the REST endpoint, the circuit dashboard started showing something. So it is showing the hello. This is the group which we created, and it shows up the request, and it shows up some dot here. So The number of times we call this particular method, it is going to call this. See this, right? Now fallback happened here. So we got a response saying fallback hello initiated, and you can notice that this is showing up red because there was a problem. And if you see here, the circuit is still closed because we have not configured anything. So by default it has a default configuration, and it is using some default configuration, and it is making the circuit to be closed still. But you can configure the number of requests which gets failed, and you can open the circuit based on that. So I'll just try calling this n number of time, right? I'll just try to call this from different URLs again and again. So you can see the number of requests which are getting hit, right? See that it is getting increased. It shows how many percentage succeeded, and you can see the failure rate as well. So this is the failure rate. It goes there, right? So 2 failed, 3 failed, etc. So this is how whenever a request happens, whenever streaming issues happen, you can easily monitor using the Hystrix dashboard. So why is the dashboard so big and there is nothing else, right? This is because we can configure multiple functions or multiple Hystrix commands in the same dashboard. Let's try creating a new method in order to show that case, right? I'll just copy paste exactly the same thing. In this case, I'll just say hello YT, hello YouTube, right? I'll just create one more group called hello YT so that we know, but I'll just call the same fallback method. So I'll just say hello YouTube. I can even call the same method. So that is what I'm doing here. Let's restart this application. So once you refresh the Hystrix dashboard, the existing information goes away, and it is getting the data via the hystrix.stream. That is why the data gets refreshed without even being refreshing this URL, because the URL which it uses, the Hystrix streams, is a streaming data. So you get messages every now and then without even having to retry. So let the Spring Boot application come up. I think it is up. Let's try refreshing our dashboard. So there is nothing in the dashboard because we have not initiated any request. So I'll just initiate a request called hello rest hello, and we also have the hello YT, right? So I'll just trigger that as well. See that once I trigger the hello YT, a new option came up here. We can do the same again. So I can do this all day long, right? I can just try doing this, and then you can see the response here, isn't it? If there is a circuit which is open, the circuit open happens here. So the circuit will be open and all the subsequent requests will be failing always. So this can be configured by different configurations. You can take a look at the Spring Cloud documentation. There are different configurations which you can configure in order to handle the Hystrix in your own way, right? So this dashboard gives us a high level picture of what's happening inside the application, how many requests are passing and how many requests are failing, etc. So this is very good when you are writing fault tolerant systems and you want to monitor this fault tolerance from a dashboard. So you can use Hystrix. If you're already using a Spring application, you can use Spring Cloud Hystrix without even having to deploy in cloud. You can notice that I have just run this application locally. I'm not doing anything else. I just installed it locally. It's not even installed as such. It is just running inside the application. So you can use Hystrix anywhere in any application. Even if it is a monolithic application, you can use it. You can monitor the fault tolerance from a dashboard. So this is what Hystrix provide. It is majorly used when you are using microservices design patterns, and fault tolerance when you want to handle fault tolerance in the microservices world. That's all I wanted to cover in this particular video. I hope you guys understood what is Hystrix and how we can use Hystrix inside a Spring Boot application. If you're not using any Spring Boot application, you can use directly the Hystrix library, and you can directly use it without the annotation. Instead of the Hystrix command annotation, you will be using the Hystrix command classes which Netflix directly provides. You can directly use the Netflix Hystrix API and do that if you're not using a Spring Boot application. I hope you guys understood um, Hystrix, and you might be using Hystrix in the future. If you like the video, go ahead and like it. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, go ahead and subscribe to it. Meet you again in the next video. Thank you very much.